yourself caught in toxic relationships that you just wish you could escape from? Would you like to build more genuine and meaningful relationships with those people that you value around you? If you've answered yes to either or both of these questions, then welcome, you're at the right place. My name's Aaron, and I would like to examine how we function in the world in order to better equip us on how to deal with the toxic situations we all encounter from time to time, and then how to nurture and build lasting relationships. So let's get straight into it as we examine the difference between human beings opposed to animals and our role in the world. And by the way, before I forget, if you haven't clicked on the subscribe button, please do that now, and also click on the notification bell so that way you won't miss out on any video that comes out. You'll be notified. That would really mean a lot to me if you do subscribe. So without any further ado, let's get straight into the presentation over here. So I want to make a distinction. There are 4 distinctions of, I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll say it in English, Domim, Tzomeach, Chai, and Medaber. There's the inanimate, there's the vegetation, there's the animal, and man. And each one has their own role in society. And interestingly enough, man, out of all the 4 species, is the only one that was endowed with consciousness. We can understand things with a moral consciousness. An animal usually can't. Sometimes there are some stories of animals saving human lives, but usually it's the human beings that are the ones that can make moral decisions about cruelty to animals and making sure that animals are not treated in an inhumane manner. And that's consciousness. That's what makes us different from the rest of the creation of the world. Either I become the missing link or I don't via my choices. I can choose to elevate the world through making moral and right choices, and I hence elevate all the 4 species from the inanimate right up to mankind of the world. So when I'm misaligned from myself, I cause a weakening in God's energy via my thoughts, my negative thoughts. It shakes up and disturbs the divine flow between me and the oneness, giving me the vitality to do what I need to do in my mission. That's the way the scheme of this world was created. So when I misalign with myself, it shakes up the whole creation of the worlds. And I'm at sorts with the divine energy, the divine flow, and I cause a weakening in that divine flow to me. The human soul is entrenched in this infinity, in this divine creation. And when I come along and I start playing the violin and I'm saying my life is worthless and I'm hopeless, that causes a weakening in the divine flow to me. And then it sort of happens almost like a roller coaster of negative things that just continue to go wrong. I always have the choice in tuning into the divine channel of flow of energy and things that happen to me in the world. And it's offered to me. And if I say no, then that causes, and I say no through that negative approach and thoughts that I have in life, so I stop up that divine pipeline of flow towards me. And then correspondingly, that causes a weakening in that flow towards me. So we have a unique role in the cosmos, and I get to choose one of the two. Either I become inferior and a victim of the cosmos, of life, of the world, or I take charge of my life and take responsibility and move forward with confidence, knowing that I've been given the rite of passage to grow and develop and succeed. Darwin writes in his book On the Origin of Species that there's fundamentally no difference between man and beast. That's one of the results of evolution, that there's fundamentally no difference. So then who are we? So based on Jewish wisdom, we have a consciousness, and we're blessed with this divine role of being able to distinguish between choosing what's morally right and morally wrong. Therefore, I can either be the missing link to this world that can bring the whole world to its perfection, or I can push the world and myself further away from its source. So either I become the missing link between the world and the cosmos, or I don't. And that happens moment to moment based on my choices. So we're going to explain how life works through the metaphor of a movie projector. So we have our movie projector here, and there's a film inside, as you can see over here, and there's light that comes out from the film. That's what we're normally associated with a good old-fashioned movie projector. And the power represents mind, or what we refer to as God. The film is a metaphor for thought, and the light is a metaphor for our stream of consciousness or thought in the moment. So we're always at a certain level of consciousness of where we are in our lives. So let's say, for example, we're just here where this purple dot is. I'll be that far away from the source of my true reality, of the source of my experiences that I'm currently experiencing. What we're feeling at that point in time doesn't really so matter anymore. It's not so important. The only thing that matters now is what direction you're looking in. If I'm looking away from source, it looks like my experience is coming from somewhere other than God in the moment. Sid Banks once said, we're always looking for our way home. I think he meant that we're trying to fill that vacuum because we're not in touch with our source, and we want to fill that vacuum up so we can just feel good again. And we can often do this in negative ways when we get caught up in the story of what's going on out there, thinking that our problems are coming from out there and we need to do something out there in order to fix up the situation and the problem. But really, we need to connect to our source in order to move effectively. And in fact, sometimes we do need to fix things from time to time. That's just part of the mission statement as a human being. But when we're looking out there and we get caught up in this movie kind of experience, thinking that the source of that experience is something other than God in the moment, that's when we get all caught up and we're looking away from source. We're dragging ourselves away from the truth, away from source, and moving into what I call our non-authentic self. And that's when things just go wrong, and it's not really healthy. The more we look away from source, the more we get caught up in our ego. And it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger as we get caught in the illusion of how we think things should work, because we're just moving further away. We usually look away from source because we temporarily got caught up in that story of where our real experience is coming from. We didn't keep that in mind. We just focused on the story itself and forgot ultimately where all stories come from the source of creation. And again, there's nothing wrong with trying to fix things, because that in fact is what we were created for. And the world was created perfectly imperfect. And our job is to deal with those purposely created imperfect things, because that's our mission, to spread light and love through good deeds and kindness. However, the question to ask yourself is, where are you coming from when you're out there in the world doing your thing? Are you coming from ego and from heavy thinking, getting all caught up in the story? Or are you coming from that solid space of oneness, that inner peace that exists within you, in me, and in every human being? And then if you're coming from that inner peace within inside you, knowing that you'll ultimately be okay, then what we're driving and striving for, we don't get caught up in. It gets less important. The good news is that the moment we look in the direction, inside out, of how things work, looking towards the true source of our experience, then something really magical happens. What seemed important, what we were holding on so tightly, gets a little bit looser. It gets a little bit easier. It's not often that important anymore. The main thing is to look and behave from a come from, quote unquote, of unity and oneness, looking towards source, towards God, who's the creator of all experience ultimately. In this formless oneness, that's all there is, and that's what we're striving to move towards. And therefore, the story out there gets less important. There's just the oneness, there's no thought, and there's nothing else. There is just this experience of oneness. Some people take this, what I'm talking about, and look at consciousness as a top-down metaphorical glass lift or ladder. The higher you go, the greater the view, the greater panorama, and the higher level of consciousness that you might be experiencing. It's like saying you're in a high level of consciousness. But when you go down this ladder, things get narrow. Down this lift or ladder, whatever you want to call it, your view isn't so panoramic. You might be in the basement. It might be very dark. And when you're looking down and your view gets sort of narrower, you feel as though you're lacking in your perspective, and you often don't feel that good. But the reality is you can look in any direction you want when you're trying to get to source. You won't get there. You can try. You're not going to have apparitions. You're not going to have enlightenment, and we don't need to. This ladder of enlightenment or high, when you're high up on the ladder or the lift, you can see more. When you're down low, you don't see so much. It's not that important anymore. The most important thing is looking in the right direction. And sometimes we'll feel good when we're looking in the direction of source, and sometimes we won't. Either way is fine. Just keep looking in that direction. The main thing is, regardless of what you might be feeling in the moment, is just to keep focused in the right direction. Sometimes you'll feel good. You could feel rotten as well. Not always what we do in life that we know is right can feel right, but feelings aren't always a good indicator of what's right. In fact, I know there are people out there that kill other human beings, and they feel great about it to the extent that they're going around celebrating the death of human life. They feel good. They feel on a high. They give out candies to other people. Does that make them right? No. So we need a moral code to follow of what's right. That's why in Jewish wisdom we have the Torah, and it gives us commandments for all of mankind. And when we're following that, regardless of what we're feeling, it doesn't always matter. Sometimes we'll feel good doing it, sometimes we won't. But the main thing is that we're looking and heading in a direction regardless of our feelings. But in the long term, you will feel good. Because ultimately you'll know that you're on a right path, that you're doing what is right. So when we're looking within this formless, this oneness towards godliness, our thinking narrows down and it falls away, and suddenly a window opens up and you're looking towards the oneness where the source of all your experience is coming from 100% of the time, and it's constant. And then when that happens, you get a little bit more quieter and a bit more certain of yourself. And this is a universal experience that anybody can have. Now, I'm not saying that you can physically look at the oneness. You can't do that. It's more of a metaphorical direction in life that I'm referring to when I'm saying look at the oneness, look in the direction of mind, look in the direction of God. What I do mean to say is, are you going to look and get caught up in this big illusion story of this egotistical form that we see and we're part of, which is not the ultimate truth? Or are we going to look beyond the facade, beyond the form, beyond the story, and look behind at what's orchestrating this beautiful tapestry, this beautiful painting called life that we physically see, but we can't physically see the spiritual side creating it behind us? Very often we get caught up in our thinking. We forget about the source of where our experience is coming from. And we get caught in our egos and our illusions. But when we wake up to the real source of our experience, we tend to settle down again, and it just takes the edge off things. So in the light of all this, we're going to look at some terminology over here to further understand how we operate in this world of illusion, as opposed to the oneness that is creating, that's the projector of this illusion. So in the beginning, there was just the oneness, there was godliness, there was nothing else. So God created, as a result of just pure oneness there, he wanted to create what we call an empty place of himself, a place that's void of himself, to give us permission to function as independent creations, as though God wasn't there, so to speak. So we're in this darkness. That's this empty void where that gave permission for limited finite beings to exist. So there's a lot of terminology over here, and there's what we call etzem, or the essence, and revelation, Giloi, God. So at etzem, that's this word over here in Hebrew, it means God source, the essence of your reality, of your feelings and your experience. And that is expressed in one of God's Hebrew names, which is a Yud, a Hey, and a Vav, and a Hey. That is ineffable. We can't pronounce it. It represents a level of godliness that transcends time. It's past, present, future, all is one. It's beyond time. But then we had the original contraction, which then moved away from the formless, the oneness where there's no ego, into an ego form, into a place where there is a revelation of lower level of godliness creations that can function independently, or it looks like they're functioning independently, as if there is no creator there. And that's where we have free choice. In this realm, it's called revelation. It's called Elohim. Elohim is the numerical value of the word nature in Hebrew, that God created a limited form of ego that exists in this world that we call nature as we have it around us. So that way permission was granted for us to function in this limited realm, in this empty space of God, so to speak. So in order for something to come into existence, God created this vacuum where he removed himself, and even though it looks like God removed himself, he never really did. It's only from our perspective that God's not there. But from God's perspective, there's no concealment of godliness whatsoever. And the world, or the world really didn't exist like it never existed before. From God's point of view, nothing's changed. It's only from the recipient's, us creation's perspective, that it looks like now there's a world and it's void of the godliness. So this is what we call Das Elyon and Das Tachton. Das Elyon represents the godly, the godly perspective, or the oneness perspective. As opposed to Das Tachton, we can call that the lower perspective. As we said, Das Elyon represents God's perspective that down here is really nothing. It's a facade. It's not really the true essence of everything. It's just, from God's perspective, it's a mirage. But to God, there is no mirage. It's still the same. But from our perspective, Das Tachton, up there the spiritual realms are nothing, and down here is what counts, because we can have an appreciation of our own egotistical existence, and God is nothing, so to speak, because we don't really understand him. So from our perspective, the true reality is down here, and up in the spiritual realms, that's nothing. Whereas the reverse, from Das Elyon, down here is nothing, and the true spiritual realm is just the pure oneness perspective. And part of the reason for this is, if I was standing in front of a metaphorical 1,000 watt globe in front of my face, there'd just be the pure white light. I'd see nothing. So God, so to speak, veiled his light with this contraction, and he covered over that light so we can have an appreciation of a little bit of that light. And that's the Das Tachton perspective, where the upper spiritual realms get concealed, and now we can have an experience as we do here on this world. So how does all of this fit into our understanding of how we function in the world, and the misunderstanding that we all fall into? On the right side over here, I have got what we call the outside-in paradigm. And we often feel that circumstances create our feelings, and thought plays no role in the situation. So somebody called me an idiot or something, and I react to them, and even though they were the catalyst for that experience, there's no realization that I can still choose what I want to think about those circumstances, and that'll influence my feelings. So that doesn't exist. It's just I put my feeling directly on the circumstance, and I become a victim of life, of that person and the world at large. That's what we call outside in, outside the truth of how life works. Now, the inside-out paradigm is where we take responsibility for our experience as well. Now, there's the divine providence, the hashgacha pratis, the initial catalyst, which ultimately comes from God, of circumstances, that will trigger us to have a certain thought in the moment, and that'll in turn, our thoughts and feelings are really essentially two sides of the one coin. Whenever you've got a thought, you've got a feeling. Whenever you've got a feeling, you have a thought. So if I give an example of this, let's say it's raining outside. From the outside in paradigm, if it's raining outside, oh, the rain's upsetting me. It's just dreary. It's miserable out here. And I'll be really upset, and I'll directly connect my feelings to the circumstance, in this case, the rain. Inside out, oh, it's raining. Ultimately, yes, it's divinely designed. It's what we call in Hebrew hashgacha pratis. It was elicited ultimately everything's elicited ultimately by God. But then after the initial thought, oh, I'm having rain thoughts, well, you and I could have rain thoughts, and other people, we could have a whole host of different feelings based on the thoughts that we're having. So let's say my little child's outside, he sees that it's raining. I can go outside and run in the rain. This is really cool. I can have fun and get my shoes all wet and my clothes wet, and it'll be really great fun. I did that as a kid. You might have done that too. Or let's say my wife or myself might be feeling, oh no, what are we going to do about the laundry? It's getting all wet. Yuck, that's terrible. Somebody else might thought, oh, you know what? This is really good for the environment. Oh, we really need the water. So from that one circumstance, we all initially had the same thought, it's raining. But then as we further extrapolate and develop our thoughts, we have total control on what we choose to think in any given moment. And this can happen because permission was granted us to be aware and operate within this world of form. Hence, this world, we can talk about cause and effect, and the fact that circumstances are a catalyst for us to have further thoughts after the initial universal experience of what we had with, let's say, raining thoughts. So, as we said, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey, this Hebrew word represents beyond time, space, and matter. And down here in Elohim, which is another name of God, represents God as He is manifest within the nature in the world. Deep down in your consciousness, you know that the ultimate objective of all existence was the creation of the lowest worlds. And it's precisely there that the drama of existence plays itself out. It is there where we were put to elevate, to inspire, to educate, to enlighten and transform the lowest into the highest, where earth and heaven will ultimately become fused together into the oneness that we had before the contraction, before this darkness was created. It's precisely the flaw of humanity that is its greatest gift to all of us. It's precisely in the lowliness of the human body, the frailty of the human spirit, the weakness of the human psyche that makes it so appealing, so lovable, because it's there that the objective and transformation of all existence happens. That's a human being that struggles with fragmented feelings and struggles with immoral thoughts and struggles with ups and downs, and can take the divine mission and internalize it and thereby deal with his own foibles and darkness and subdue his or own limitations and confront their darkness and their skeletons and their demons and their ghosts and immorality and addictions and problems and challenges because of nature and nurture and events and experience and all the combinations. For more explanation, speak to your therapist. And it's us human beings that can bring this light, this divine light, into this fragmented world and lift it up. It's true that we can't always control what thoughts initially come into us. Sometimes we can, but very often we can't. But that's part of the human condition. That's the beauty of the challenge. And after those initial thoughts, permission was granted to us to make a choice, to choose the right ones, to entertain those improper thoughts, or to push them away metaphorically with two hands and transform the darkness into light through good deeds and kindness that we perform in the world. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope you were able to make some sense out of that. And then we're coming back to our toxic relationships and nurturing more meaningful relationships. In the light of what we've discussed, now we're going to be empowered to navigate those toxic relationships with more savvy and nurture more meaningful relationships. And this is not so much of a how you actually nurture those meaningful relationships and how you navigate away from those toxic relationships. It's more of an empowering. And each person will see for themselves when they realize of where their experience is initially coming from, and then after the initial catalyst from an external stimuli, knowing that their thought, they can choose what to think 100% of the time. After the initial external stimuli, they get to choose what they think and what they feel and what they do. And when you realize that you're in a continual relationship with this oneness, in this illusion of this world that we're in, you'll be empowered to naturally be in the thick of a very difficult relationship and yet be detached. You'll be right next to the person who might be yelling at you, but you'll be in a state of detachment and peace and quiet and an inner core that's unshakable, that will help you deal in the most strategic way with that difficult person. And when you're coming from that inner core of peace and confidence and knowing that you're okay despite the volcanic eruptions that might be happening outside yourself, you'll know what to say to that person. And you'll also know what to say to other people when it comes to nurturing positive, more meaningful and lasting relationships. Hope that helps. If you did like this, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.